Hello, how are you all? Welcome to another version of our Lunch and Learn. I was out last week, so I'm kind of rusty this week, but we have the most delightful speaker that you may hear ever. Barclay DuPriest manages the bookstore at Randolph-Macon College in Ashland. And the first time I met her was way back in 2018 when my daughter started attending there, and I was in the bookstore looking around at all the stuff, and she started talking. I heard her talking, and she said something like, "Who's the mother, who's the daughter?" And I was like, who is she talking about? And it was just, we just struck up a friendship, and she became friends with my mother because my mother had her talk to Historic Hopewell about Peter Francisco and Hercules Mulligan, so you may remember her from those years. But you are in for a treat today. So, today Barclay's program is titled That Gibson Guy, and she's going to focus on the talents of Charles Dana Gibson and his creation of the Gibson Girl image. Barclay DuPriest graduated from Randolph-Macon Women's College. She's a member of the Scotchtown chapter of the DAR, Ashland Presbyterian Church, and of the Women's Club of Ashland. She has been manager of the Randolph-Macon College campus store since 1985. She has presented her earlier programs to Historic Hopewell, and again, they were Peter Francisco and Hercules Mulligan. So, I present to you Barclay DuPriest.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, is my mic on? You all, I can't tell you how excited I am to be back here. I have loved coming to do these programs, and I love the Randolph-Macon connection that I have with so many people here. I'm wild about those revolutionary heroes like your own Peter Francisco and Hercules Mulligan. Today is not going to be quite like that. This is a program I did on Charles Dana Gibson. Please raise your hand if you know who the Gibson girls were. Yay! I first heard about the Gibson girls from my grandma, and I thought, what in the world are they? I had never seen them. My mama kept telling me about them. My mother had an antique shop in Burkeville, Virginia, real metropolitan area. Anyway, then one time when she bought a barrel of things at an auction, and I want you to please look at this at the end. There is a book over there where in 1904 and 1905, a man in Richmond, his name is on the front cover, cut out all of the inside pictures from Collier's magazine and put them in there. Don't worry about destroying it. I want you to come up and see it. It's already kind of destroyed. But that really got me hooked on Dana Gibson when I looked at those photographs. So I'm gonna get started. You all, you've already finished eating. I thought you had something to keep you busy. All right, here we go. If I can see, wait a minute, let's see. The Gibson girl was, as my grandma used to say, something else. Something else indeed. The Gibson girl was a cultural, fashion, and even political phenomenon in illustrations in popular American magazines for over 2 decades. Beginning in the 1890s, the Gibson girl took the country and indeed the whole world by storm. She was taller than other women and infinitely more spirited and independent, yet altogether feminine. She was willowy, elegant, and beautiful, with a tiny, tiny, minuscule waist and soft, perfectly coiffed, piled high, pompadour hair. She could ride bicycles. Something's wrong here. She could play golf. Go ahead, Gabe. There. Go back to that one. That's the one that's the guys are looking for. They're supposed to be looking for the missing ball they hit, and you can see who they're looking at. And she could, thanks, Gabe. She could swim in the ocean. She could hold her own in a room full of men. Always well-bred, there was, however, a flash of mischief in her eyes. The Gibson girl epitomized the newly emancipated post-Victorian woman. Her sporty jaw and often indifferent gaze signified that she was equal, if not superior, to the men who called on her. She was above all else the ideal of an independently minded American woman who was a champion of equality, justice, and respect. Graced with a balance of every woman in her personality, she became a heroine to a wide array of the late 19th century population, young and old, rich and even poor. Now, just who was responsible for those illustrations that captured not only citizens of the USA but also of the world? His drawings were all signed simply C.D. Gibson. Many who didn't know that his name was Charles Dana Gibson and that he was known by family and friends and business associates as Dana, just simply referred to him as this way. Oh, that Gibson guy, you know, the one who draws the girls. That's how they refer to him. I thought that was funny. Don't y'all think that's funny? No. Anyway, Dana Gibson was born in Roxbury, Massachusetts in 1867, one of 6 children whose family descended from a long line of New Englanders. This heritage had a notable influence on Dana's character. Throughout his life, he retained a Yankee practicality, fierce and shrewd, coupled with a determination that motivated him even when the odds were against him. These character traits were evident in his early boyhood when he first discovered his artistic talents. All right, when 5-year-old Dana was ill and bedridden, his father gave him paper and a pair of scissors and showed him how to cut silhouettes. Dana grabbed the scissors and began and continued to produce creations that amazed his family, teachers, and friends for years. These were just something that you can't believe. He never looked at anything when he created these silhouettes. And like, for example, if you said, give me a silhouette of a horse, that would be easy, but then they'll say, create a silhouette of a galloping horse, and he would just take the cut the scissors and do it. An interesting fact about that Dana's father did not know, Dana and his sisters took these silhouettes and sold them to people all in the neighborhood to get money. The father was a little embarrassed by this and cut that off quickly. When he was 12, his parents sent his cutouts to an art exhibition where they were displayed alongside many works created by considerably older artists. Here's one critic's review. The silhouettes on white paper cut by 12-year-old Master Dana Gibson, many of the best of them created when he was only 8, in almost every case are cut from the idea in his own mind, not copied from other pictures. This work is the product of instinct without training. The subjects are all of life in action. Whatever is done with a perfection that I never saw surpassed. Dana's father, a salesman, struggled financially and moved his family to Chicago and St. Louis before settling permanently in Flushing, New York. While still in Flushing High School, Dana became an apprentice to a sculptor. His parents had thought that sculpture might be a logical next step for their talented son, but this art did not interest him in the least. His mind, quick to see a picture in one dimension, was not inclined to wrap itself around an object and visualize it from all directions. During his high school, Dana spent much time outdoors playing sports. At a height of 6 feet 2 inches, he had, quote, the symmetrical, well-knit, and muscled build of a first-rate oarsman, swimmer, and weight thrower, end quote. Girls of today would simply just call Dana hot. He was, for his day. Following his high school years, and with great financial sacrifices by his family, Gibson entered the Art Studios League, where for 2-year Students League, he concentrated not on cutting silhouettes, not on sculpture, but on drawing. Later, 12 years after he had ended his Art Students League stint, Gaynor sadly and modestly looked back on his drawings there and described them as no better than when I went in 2 years before. He said, at any rate, my work wasn't a bit more saleable. Fortunately, after a few short years, magazine publishers and the reading public decidedly felt different. Gibson was ambitious and began a campaign to present his portfolio to all the publishing houses and printers in New York City. Finally, in 1886, Gibson sold one of his illustrations to John Ames Mitchell, the editor of Life magazine. How many of you all remember Life magazine and how big it was? Yeah, okay. Who was an illustrator himself, who thought Gibson's work was reasonably bad, but he saw some courage and honesty in the lines. The illustration, which doesn't remotely foreshadow later Gibson girl drawings, was entitled The Moon and I. From The Mikado, which was the current rage on Broadway. Although this drawing appeared in the March 25th issue of Life with no C.D. Gibson signature below it, and this drawing of a dog looking at the moon brought Gibson only $4. Dana Gibson felt that he was on his way. Gibson's fame grew among publishing houses as the word quickly spread that he could show up and meet a deadline for drawing within 2 hours. His commission steadily increased. This success enabled Gibson to move from Flushing to his first studio on 33rd Street and Broadway. Up to this point, Gibson's work had resembled the more satiric and darker drawings of political cartoonist Thomas Nash. However, the transition to the fine line detail and long flowing lines of his later work can be best attributed to Gibson's pilgrimage to London and Paris, where he studied under George du Maurier and Phil May for only 2 months because his money completely ran out and he returned to New York, but with a new determination, a new hope, and definitely some new techniques. Upon his return to America, Gibson found new markets for his drawings. All the big magazines, Century, Harper's, Weekly, Scribner's, Life, Collier's, opened their doors to him. He also began to illustrate books and to even create advertising campaigns for corporations, even railroads. In 1893, Gibson received critical acclaim for the 39 drawings he exhibited at the Chicago World's Fair. But then Gibson's dam was truly getting ready to bust wide open. Gibson joined the 5-member American Beauty group of illustrators who began to depict American women as single, liberated, and modern, far removed from the maternal Victorian girls depicted earlier. Charles Dana Gibson's overnight sensation, Gibson Girl illustrations, were about to take over the globe for 20 years. Scores of young society girls presented themselves to the dashingly handsome Gibson as unpaid models for his Gibson Girl illustrations. While he enjoyed these impromptu visits from the volunteer models, he actually preferred to pay professionals when he could afford them. But in 1893, Charles Dana Gibson was to meet the true inspiration, ideal, and sometime model for his Gibson Girl. Dana Gibson, receiving large commissions for his Gibson Girl illustrations, became quite desirable in the New York social scene and attended many of the city's debutante functions. Little did he know that in 1893, that one of the South's, indeed Virginia's, most touted debutantes would become his one and only true Gibson Girl. Irene Langhorne, daughter of a wealthy Richmond Railroad man, not only captured the hearts of all socialites in Richmond and White Sulphur Springs, but indeed spread her beauty and fame throughout the East. In 1893, she was asked to lead the debutante balls in Philadelphia, New Orleans, and New York City. You need not guess what dashing New York City illustrator met and wooed the Southern beauty when she debuted in the Big Apple. Irene Langhorne was reputed to have rejected marriage proposals from 62 suitors before she accepted Dana's proposal. Now, here's where it's getting closer to home. Following a lavish rehearsal dinner dance held atop the Jefferson Hotel the night before, the wedding of the Charles Dana Gibsons took place at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Richmond in 1895. Did I show the pictures of her? Oh, you did. Gabe, I didn't even look at them. Did we go through all of them? Oh, yeah. There she is. There she is, and there's another picture. Well, you all have seen them. And there, this is on the streets of New York, and maybe that's it. I forgot, sorry. Here is a description from the book Virginians Out Front that described the wedding. Quote, thousands thronged the streets of Richmond for 8 blocks from St. Paul's to the bride's parents' home, where the wedding breakfast was served. Outside the church, the crowd tore to tatters the awning which had been set up for the procession. Among the guests was Ethel Barrymore. The bridesmaids, wearing ostrich feathered hats and dresses with shawls of black chrysanthemums, and the groomsmen, gloved and clad in Prince Albert coats and holding silk top hats under their left arms, seemed sophisticated for Richmond. A diamond clip held the bride's veil over her golden hair. This wedding was seen by many as a symbolic marriage of North and South, a reconciliation between Confederate and Yankee. With her marriage to Dana Gibson, Irene, who had represented to Virginia's genteel society the personification of the Southern belle, became the incarnation of the all-American Gibson girl. I need to say, too, that the Langhorns would spend their summers sometimes in Ashland. I'm not sure which house they were, but one of our Ashland historians says, yes, the Langhorns, as did many people in Richmond, wealthy people in Richmond, had homes in Ashland where they would just come to be cooler in the summer. That was true, and there's one other thing I need to mention that's not on here. Do you all know who Lady Astor was? Yeah. Lady Astor was the very first woman member of Parliament in England. Lady Astor was a Virginian. She was the sister of Irene Langhorne. She married a viscount over there, and she was in Parliament for maybe 20, 25 years. She is probably more famous. She's very famous for her remarks that she'd make to people, particularly to offend Winston Churchill. I know here's one of it's funny. This has nothing to do with my Gibson girl.
Speaking to Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry. My mic's down. He said, she said to Winston Churchill, she said, Winston, he said to her first, you look really ugly tonight, to her, and she said, oh, Winston, you're drunk, and he said, you look ugly anyway. And they said things like that. She was famous for that. Her sister did not do anything like that. Our little Southern belle went up to New York City and just loved everything about New York and made everybody love her. The Dana Gibsons were quite an important part of New York high society, and Dana found ample subject matter for his drawings there. He never hesitated to mock the more unsavory aspects of what he witnessed. In drawing after drawing, many featuring his Gibson girl, Dana crusaded against Anglomania, that American frenzy for anything English, and the willingness of American fathers to just give their daughters to impoverished English dukes and earls simply to acquire titles for them. I think it's really kind of ironic that that is exactly what the Langhorne father did with her sister who was over there when she was married to, that's the way that she married a nobleman in England. But Dana was making fun of that because that was all the trend. Again and again, he drew his stock characters, and here they come in a minute. The fickle young woman, the love-struck youth, the dissolute nobleman, and the tasteless nouveau riche. Most of his drawings conveyed a satiric, romantic, or an amusing idea, focusing on the simplest topics: love, money, age, greed, and simple moral truths. Gibson had the ability of making the objects of his satire, from politicians to society figures, laugh right along with him. But no matter how eager he was to have readers of Life and Collier's appreciate his satiric attempts, Gibson knew that his bread and butter was the Gibson girl, and he wisely included her image in almost all of his illustrations. Let's take a look at some of Gibson's illustrations. All right, Gabe's got them ready here. This is a cute one, and it just says, Signs of Spring. You can see, and just remember, this is a great big picture in the middle of Life magazine. That one is just, love is the feature there. You can see the girl is looking a little aloof too. All right, next Gibson girl coming up. Oh, this one is good. The greatest game in the world, his move. She's not about to let him win, I can tell you that right now. But there is a Gibson girl, and that really looks a lot like Dana Gibson. And, oh, this one is cute. The grandfather says, Say, Willie, don't you want to go through a toy shop with me this afternoon and see all the pretty things? Willie says, I'm willing to, Pop, if you'll get any pleasure out of it. Okay, and this one is, this disinherited, selfish, bad-tempered, and unreasonable. This is the father who is not willing to give his girl up yet. So he put that sign on her. Look, they're either laughing at him, and poor, bless her heart, but the father's happy. Okay. Oh, this one, I have the titles on these, I guess I should look. Oh, that was his only child, Mr. Doty's little scheme for retaining his daughter. This one is their first quarrel, and they've only been engaged for 20 minutes. This one is wireless telegraphy. If you can see, they're touching their toes while the old grandmother is talking to them, and they're pretending to listen, and they're doing a little foot love making. Okay. This one says, advice to students, always be read to. It saves the eyes for better things. Okay, this one says, the expert, what makes you think she has one? I hear nothing. You couldn't find a heart in her. Okay, this one is called the weaker sex. Can you see them under the magnifying glass and the little man down there? And they've got, that one's the weaker sex. Then, the ambitious mother and her obliging clergyman. Oh my God, you can see the man that she married, but she married that, and look, he's got Clarence, anyway, he's obliging because she wanted her to be married to him. Okay, this one is, after her in-person interview, why she didn't get the job. What do you think? Look, she wasn't about to have that woman in her house. Okay, now, then, maybe, Gabe, I've got to catch up with myself. Wait a minute. I want you to think right now, for one thing for me, these were such big illustrations, as you will see in here, and you would think, how could they be so popular? How could they sell so many magazines? How could it do that? A large percentage of the population in New York City could not read. But these illustrations were so clever, and they could laugh. They could look over the shoulders. And a lot of times the people who bought Life magazine or Collier's would look and they'd read them out, laugh, and they would laugh at them too, and they would say, "Oh, you should have seen what the Gibson girls were doing this week." But it was so much, it was humor they could laugh at even when they couldn't read. Soon accompanying the Gibson girl was the so-called Gibson man. Look at him, a perfect escort for the Gibson girl, a chivalrous suitor and squire, distinguished debonair, yet always victim to the whim of a spirited woman. All the while, Gibson girl mania continued to delight people from around the world. There were Gibson girl dishes, pillows, shirtwaists, shoes, folio books, wallpaper, there's his wallpaper, and more. Songs were written about her, as well as Broadway plays. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia and Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany were collectors. Her image appeared in shop windows as far away as Japan. I am only mentioning this to let you know that Dana Gibson's Gibson girl creations were lining his pockets quite well as he continued to concentrate on his satirical, often laughable depiction of many aspects of society. Following the publishing of Gibson's book, People of Dickens in London, as seen by Charles Dana Gibson, which he wasn't too fond of the English, so they weren't wild about that book. But he was soon to produce his best work, and here it comes. This is the thing that the everyday man in New York City went wild about. His best work was The Education of Mr. Pip of New York. Often hailed as Gibson's best illustrations, they chronicle the adventures of the wealthy but downtrodden Mr. Pip, a small, measly little man with a large, overbearing wife and two beautiful Gibson girl-type daughters. And nothing was funnier to the American public than the trials of Gibson's Mr. Pip as he took his wife and daughters to Europe. Here are some illustrations from Collier's that delighted Mr. Pip fans. Okay, there's Mr. Pip. And, okay, there's Mr. Pip, overbearing wife, and two beautiful Gibson girl daughters. He doesn't really want to go to Europe, to go over there, but she's made up her mind. The girls are saying, "Please, Dad, oh, please, let's go." Okay. So over there, you can see he's not too happy, a little seasick. There are the girls, and right behind is the mama. Okay. Now, oh my God, he spent a fortune. Look at the things, and it said they only just starting. The mother is saying, oh yeah, there she is, and she's getting dresses for herself too. And, oh, that's at the opera. He was not, the girls, Mr. Pip was not having too great a time. And then, Lord, they went to Monte Carlo or something they did, and look at him, it was his heyday, and everybody was so excited. Mr. Pip had something fun, great happening for him. And, he's picking out more, the mother, where's the mother? She's not even in the picture. They had to get jewelry for the girls over there. Mr. Pip was spending a fortune over there, all for this. And then, they're trying to talk him into letting them marry these guys that they met. I don't think that they were nobility over there, but they're saying, please, please, Daddy, and look at the girls. Of course, Gibson girls can persuade their fathers to do anything. And they're still waiting, and they, of course, are their handsome husbands-to-be. Mr. Pip is trying to make up his mind. And there they are, going down for a double wedding, and there goes Mr. Pip. Up and look, there they are, the babies, Mr. Pip holding the grandchildren, and all is well. People really did enjoy, is that the end of that game? I think. People really loved that Mr. Pip. Here he was, forced by, they loved the old dominating wife. They loved the beautiful girls. They loved it, anyway. But you can see every week when the magazine would come out, people who couldn't even read could find out what was going on. After the great success of Mr. Pip, Gibson illustrated 3 series, A Widow and Her Friends, The Social Ladder, The Weaker Sex, and The Story of a Susceptible Bachelor. Here's a critic's quote about the conclusion of the social ladder drawings. Mr. Gibson's drawings fairly crackle with spontaneous mirth. The comic situation is there exactly as nature prepared it, not as laboriously contrived by the conscious artist. It never occurred to you that Gibson invented the joke, only that he saw and recorded it. In his illustrations, Gibson also brought attention to the poor and downtrodden. Here are a few of these many drawings. And you can see that's in New York City, and there's one of the socialites. They're looking down, and you can see the people that are working there and there, the poor people. There's a man on the street. I guess she's begging too, and the man, I don't know what the caption under that was. And they're waiting in the food line to get food. And there's a little girl who just dreams of making it on Broadway. She's a poor little girl, and she stands outside and looks up at the playbills for Broadway. Is that the last one of those, Gabe? All right. Good thing I've got you. After a major publishing war, and this was a big one, over the rights to Gibson's illustrations, Life and Collier's agreed to each feature Gibson's work. Gibson was making a fantastic salary of over $65,000 per year. And you'd think that was quite a lot, like in the early 1900s, and could command $1,000 per illustration. But Gibson was restless. He yearned to expand his horizons. With no financial worries, Gibson in 1905 announced plans to give up drawing and took his family of 4 to Europe for 3 years, where he studied oil painting in Spain, Italy, and France. However, the panic of 1907 and the collapse of the Knickerbocker Trust Company forced him back to the USA to resume his career as an illustrator. Upon his return, Gibson resumed illustrating for Life, Collier's, and Cosmopolitan, but the times they were a-changin', and the public was beginning to turn its eyes elsewhere. No longer were folks interested in the Gibson girl or in what she represented. The flapper, kicking up her heels to the Charleston, had taken over. Black and white illustrations were replaced by photography. Gibson's drawings featuring his renowned girls were beginning to be regarded as relics. As World War I approached, Gibson's drawings became increasingly militant, and his attacks on the Kaiser grew more and more frequent. In 1917, Gibson headed the American Division of Pictorial Publicity, comprised of the country's top illustrators who met weekly without pay to create Why We Fight posters. The Gibson world was transformed into Miss Columbia, urging Americans to buy Liberty bonds and defend Europe. Here are a few examples of Gibson's many World War I posters. There, can you drive a car? Will you drive one in France? Immediate service at the front. And you can see his girls being transformed into Miss Columbia, okay, and help her carry on. Miss America reports for service stir, the Women's Army, always promoting women's rights while he's also promoting our wartime effort. And there he is, there's the Kaiser, and there is the Gibson girl turned into, well, she's got democracy on her head. I don't think she's really Miss Columbia there. Could be. And is that it? Okay, what'd you say? That's it. When victory was finally achieved, Dana Gibson was the most celebrated of the illustrators who had donated their time and their talent to the war effort. A bust of Gibson was created to honor his contributions. France awarded him her Legion of Honor. Belgium appointed him an officer of the Crown. After the war, Gibson continued to illustrate for life. Following the death of his friend John Ames Mitchell, who had first paid him $4 for that little picture of the dog barking at the moon, Gibson in 1918 bought controlling interest in Life and became the editor of Life. but Gibson discovered he had little editorial skills, and when change in popular taste following the war resulted in a decline in sales, Gibson realized that life needed new leadership, and he sold the magazine in 1932. He did, however, ultimately receive praise for his painting, as well as numerous lifetime awards for his illustrations, and honorary degrees from universities for his contributions to American culture. He and Virginia's own Gibson girl, Irene Langhorne, retired to their homes in New York and on the coast of Maine. They delighted in sharing time with their 2 children and their many grandchildren before Charles Dana Gibson died of a heart attack at age 77 in 1944. Gibson's empathy, understanding, and support of women's rights cannot be overstated. In his one-panel magazine drawings, he magically championed women's rights while creating illustrations focusing on affairs of the heart. Through his Gibson girl, Dana Gibson sought to make the world a better place while also delivering clever humor to make Americans laugh at themselves. I'm only guessing, but I think maybe my grandma was right when she describes Charles Dana Gibson as something else. What do you think? Yeah. You all, I do hope if you have time afterwards that you will come over and look at that. And even look on the front, you might be a relative of the man in Richmond who saved all those things. And there are other artists in there too from these are all from Collier's, but you just keep flipping and you will see them, and you can imagine the impact they had when people opened those magazines and there were those great big illustrations. One more thing, Nancy Hugo, do you all know who Nancy Hugo is? She's from Chester. She's an author and she's a good friend of mine. She gave me that picture of that had been in her mother's home of a Gibson girl and Cupid, who was often in the things. And Cupid is weaving a heart, weaving a little bow of a heart for that. But on the back of it, what did I say it said on the back? It says Hopewell, Virginia, and it says,
Glass.
It's what?
D.H. Glass.
D.H. Glass, Hopewell, Virginia. It's on the back of that, and I didn't know whether anybody knew who, it has 2 things from that company on the back of that. Do you all know who D.H. Glass was, or was it a company, or was it a man? Don't know, but I brought it today because the picture was framed here in Hopewell, Virginia. And I thank you again for letting me come and tell you about Charles Dana Gibson. Thanks. Oh, I gotta thank my trusty assistant, Gabe LaPlante, who is assistant manager of the campus store at Randolph-Macon. You don't know what we went through. We didn't have the right zip drive in here, and the pictures didn't match anything. He called the campus store, we got it all straight. And the long-suffering husband over there in the orange shirt, who always helps me. Thank you, all my friends, for coming, and that's it. Thanks.
Barclay,
What?
are there any questions?
Oh, can you hear? I can't hear very well.
Scott?
How long did his wife survive him, and did they have any children?
That's a good question. I said he died, he was 77 when he died. I think they were close to the same age. I know she did survive him. I know she came with their children, but I don't really know. But they were a very loving family, and they didn't have any financial worries, so they could go up to Maine on the shore and do that. But that was truly his Gibson girl.
How many children did he have?
He had 2 children, and it was a big deal that the connection of Richmond to Charles Dana Gibson. And the people, it seems, back in the early 1900s, knew that Virginia, Irene Langhorne, was the real Gibson girl. So, oh, I will tell you one more thing, and then I'll shut up.
No.
I was talking about the irony of, I forgot something. I thought the irony of it. I thought Charles Dana Gibson.
Speaking to Mike.
Oh, sorry, Charles Dana Gibson. But his drawings were so satirical. He would make fun of things, and often made fun of the nouveau riche. And when you think back on that wedding in Richmond, Virginia, with the chrysanthemums all over the thing, I thought that kind of, it was epitome. I mean, I think Dana Gibson was kind of one of those. I had that feeling. His father-in-law, Mr. Langhorne, came from Danville. All the girls were born in Danville, Virginia. He had some money and he lost it, and he was poor. Then he got in the tobacco business, and when he got to Richmond, he's a little nouveau riche too. But anyway, I thought that was kind of funny that their wedding, which was really a marriage of North and South, it was kind of fancy-dancy for that time. Anyway, but I still think he's the best ever.
Barclay,
What?
did he make any advertisements for women's voting rights?
For women's, for what?
Voting rights?
I mean, not that I know of. No, because he did not. But that's a good question. I'll have to look in that. It was a lot of the war effort, but he always thought that picturing women as men's equal, of course the joke and everything is he always made the women appear to be superior to the men. And some of us might feel that way. Anyway, but he did that. He always did. He promoted, but I'll have to look into most of his things afterwards were for the war effort, which I thought that was another thing, irony. He hated Kaiser Wilhelm II, and he was one of the collector of the Gibson girls' memorabilia. But anyway, the end. Thank you.